All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1,000,000 Relationships Podcast. And today I am here with Heather Porter. Heather, welcome. So awesome to have you today.
It's so good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. And I'm gonna give a shout out to Michelle Prince because Michelle was the one that connected you and I, and her and I did a interview a while back, and then I got to find out through that process that she is really close. She does a lot of work closely with the Ziegler Foundation, the Ziegler
Yeah.
company and stuff, and we just made such a connection. And after doing the interview, she's like, Kevin, she goes, you have got to interview Heather for your podcast. And so here we are. This meeting right here is the first time that you and I have ever met, ever talked together. And yet, we've been talking for a few minutes before we hit the record button. It's just, Heather, I feel like I've known you for years because we just have this mutual friend in Michelle that opened the door for us. And it's like, what a testament to the power of relationships.
Oh, I know. I love it. I feel the same. Like we've known each other for ages.
Yeah. And so, Michelle, if you happen to be listening to this, thank you so much. And so, what I'd like to do, Heather, is I just want to start by turning it over to you. I want to, let you set a little bit of context. So we'll talk about, what you do, who you serve, what inspires you most about the work that you do, and also give us a little bit of the background and backstory about how you got into doing the work that you now do.
Yeah, perfect. Great question. And yes, I am a big avid believer in the power of relationships, as you will hear as we start to have a conversation. It's everything. So my company is called Website Love, and I do website development and also social media marketing and Google Ads for SMEs, specifically service-based businesses, coaches, consultants as well. I am originally from the States, and I actually have been living in Sydney, Australia for 20 years.
Wow.
So I guess I'm sort of an Aussie now, as you would say. But look, I got into this. I sort of fell into in digital marketing in 2008. I used to work in the personal development industry, running events for Tony Robbins, which is sort of in a roundabout way, the Zig Ziglar, Michelle, everyone hangs out in the same crew. So I used to run events for Tony Robbins, and then I ended up moving out to Australia because I fell in love with this country while I was running Date with Destiny up in Gold Coast in Queensland in Australia. Oh. And basically, came back, stayed, and through working with other speakers and promoters here in Australia and the Asian area, so APAC, as you would say, we basically, I was around that time, 2008, and this thing called Facebook was on the rise. It's like, Facebook, here I am, reach your crew and your team and your tribe 24/7. And so one of the other speakers I was working with at the time, he's like, there's this thing called Facebook, Heather. How do I get into it? What do we do? What's this whole new world online? I want to get my tribe out, to reach my tribe 24/7. So I changed gears, Kevin, and that's why I changed from running events into digital marketing in a nutshell.
Gotcha. So that was 2008, you said?
When I changed from running seminars and events into the digital space. Yeah,
okay.
Correct.
Okay, so that's been, man, that's been like 15 years ago now. That's been 15 years.
I know.
And so, man, I remember 2000. I remember 2008 very well because that was I had just started a publishing company a couple of years prior to that, and that was we hit a big milestone in our company that year in 2008.
Oh, wow.
And stuff, and
so good.
So now with what you do, so what inspires you most about the work that you do in serving the clients that you serve?
Yeah, look, I love to teach and simplify what's out there. We as entrepreneurs and small business owners, we can get really, caught up in the shiny object syndrome. And it's like, oh, look at that new trend and that new tool and that new app. And what I like to do is actually bring it back down to the basics and the foundations of growing a business and marketing. and then using the tools around you in a more simplistic way to get really good results.
Okay.
So I like to simplify. I like to teach. I'm a trainer for Meta. There's 5 of us in Australia. Actually, Facebook Meta.
Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh.
to do that, I teach at a university here in Australia as well for sort of an upskilling center for continuing education. So I guess even though I have this business and this team that I'm growing, for me, I really like the being in front of people, having a chat, seeing their little faces light up when they go, "Oh my gosh, I can do that."
Yeah. So who would you describe is your best kind of client, Heather? I mean, like where are they at right now, and what have they already got in place in order to, like, make them just such an ideal candidate for you guys to be able to help?
I love that question. So they have been in business for at least, I'd say, 2 years or more.
Okay.
They already have a bit of, systems and procedures in place. They are ready to grow and scale. They have a team. It could be a very small team, but they know their market. They've been selling products or services. They're like, okay, I'm ready. Let's do this. Let's grow.
Okay.
And they come to me, and that's when we can do the most magic for them.
Perfect. Gotcha. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So now that we've got a little bit of context set here and people having a good idea of who you guys are, what you're all about, Heather, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. And I'm going to ask you a really powerful question here. So, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And Heather, I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationship.
So yeah, there's definitely a few,
Okay.
but the main big one, funny because a lot of people sort of say they had a mentor that changed their life, but in this case, he was my employer, and that is somebody I mentioned earlier, and that is Tony Robbins, but from
Okay.
a very different perspective than sort of I learned personal development and I was empowered. It's not that. It's more that it's funny. When I started working for him, I graduated from San Diego State University, and I saw this ad in the paper just back before the online things going on, but it was in the paper, and it said Robbins Research International hiring for a customer service agent, and I was like, cool, I have an international business degree. It's an international company. Let's do this. So I go and I get an interview. And they said to me at the time, I was probably one of 2 people that had no idea who Tony Robbins was when I got
Wow.
hired.
Wow.
So I didn't even know. I just thought this company sounds cool. What's personal
Uh-huh.
development? I was,
Uh-huh.
in my mid-20s. Um, so I basically started working there. But truly what happened as a result of working there was the realization. So 2 things. Number one, as you probably know, Kevin, Tony's mentor is Jim Rohn. And one of the things Jim says is you're the average of the 5 people you spend your time with. And when I was working with Tony, I looked and reevaluated my peer group. And I realized I was not probably going anywhere fast, even though I worked for this incredible employer. I didn't have the greatest of peer groups, let's say.
Okay.
And so that was one, relationships, right? I had to seek new relationships. Number 2 was because I came out to Australia and worked at an event here, that moment in time, the people that I met, it became a moment that completely changed my life, so much so that I left the States to move here. So
Wow.
pretty big change.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So
Yeah.
what was it that, because that's a big change. That's a big shift
Yes.
to move from the States to Australia. What was it about that that just really compelled you, that just let you know, or maybe it didn't let you know, but it felt right in the moment that, like, I'm doing this. What was it?
Yeah. So after a date with Destiny, after working at this big event of his, we meaning a collective, interesting crew of people that worked at the event, came together, whether it was volunteers, some of my teammates, trainers for Tony. There was a bit of a mix of us, probably around I want to say up to 20. We went
Okay.
out on a boat in Queensland to celebrate the fact that the event was over. And we were
Okay.
sort of just cruising around in these beautiful waters and had, some champagne and canapes and celebrating life. And I looked around the boat and I looked at the people in the boat. And I was like, wow, I think there was a journalist, there was an heir of a very large company, trainers, personal development, coaches, like the whole mix of these fantastic individuals. And I looked at them and I realized that that's what I wanted. I wanted those types of relationships. Whereas, to give you context, in San Diego, although I had an amazing crew around me, on the side of working for Tony, I also did nightclub production and art shows and fashion and music events. So it was an interesting, eclectic group of people, some of them going nowhere fast. So I was on this boat and I just had this epiphany and I thought, now's the time to make change. And something about the country spoke to me, and I ended up going back to the States and negotiating with my boss at the time, if I go to Australia, could I do contract work for the promoters for Tony in that area of the world? And, and I sort of negotiated my way into doing that and left my life behind and came here because I knew I wanted more and I wanted different relationships and I wanted different people in my life.
Wow. Wow. And all these years later, here you are, still there. It
Still
was
here.
obviously a right move, wasn't it?
It really was. Yeah, it really was. I feel like the opportunities are, look, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the clean slate. Maybe it was the fact that I came here by myself and I needed to network and I needed to meet people and I needed to put myself out there. Whatever it was, I was well and truly out of my comfort zone. And because of the people I met, I definitely attribute that to the fact that, I'm a speaker, I'm a mentor for multiple entrepreneurial organizations here. I'm a trainer for Facebook, and there's these opportunities that I don't know if I would have ever had living in the comfort zone of my old peer group.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So now I want to make sure, because I think you mentioned there was, some other people that you went on. I just want to make sure if that's
Yeah,
the case. I want to make sure I give you the time to do that too.
sure.
So,
So another person was when I came to Australia, there was a guy that I met who basically through the Tony Robbins network, again, networks, right? So he's like, oh yeah, there's a house there's a share house and you can get a room in the house. And I have some friends. And so he instigated the initial area where I was going to stay for the first time in Australia. So I moved into this room in a house. So he helped me find that. Then also he said, oh, my friend is graduating from a life coaching school to be life coach back in the days when life coaches weren't even very well known.
sure,
And
sure.
he's like, do you want to come? And because you work with Tony, do you want to come and just come out and just meet new people? And I said, yeah, of course. So I went to that event and I introduced myself to the two directors of this company. And they came to me and they said, we're growing and we need a head of operations. We need somebody in the office to help us grow our life coaching school. And I said, okay, great. And they said, but you're American. And I said, yeah, can we work together so I can get a visa? Because by this point, I was still on a visitor's visa and networking with the intention of staying in Australia. And it's hard to stay here if you're an American because we're not part of the Commonwealth collective. So it's hard to actually stay.
Okay.
So I look, I through that moment, I worked with these two directors and ultimately because of this guy got the room in the house and then was introduced to the two people that became my passport into Australia through working in their company and getting a visa.
Wow. How awesome.
One person.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So, wow. And so you've been there now for 15 years, correct? Is that right?
20.
20 years. 20.
I know.
And so if you look back,
Yeah.
I first of all, I want to acknowledge because that is a big. I'm just like that's a big step, and
Yeah.
to just move from the States to Australia, and just kind of follow your heart, and
Yeah.
it's worked out really good for you. And
Yeah.
if you look back over the last 20 years and these relationships that you've had in your life, I want you to kind of just like, I'm sure you can come up with a lot of examples, but just what's one where you got to make a really substantial impact, and hands down, it would have never happened if not for your relationship with whoever that person is and stuff. And what's the first thing
Okay.
that comes up top of mind for you?
So my mind was just going through lots of different examples, but the
I
one that
can
just sort of
imagine.
stopped, it's like, pick me, pick me. So there's, so back a while ago when I was still transitioning from working in the personal development event space into digital marketing, I was running a club called the Billionaire Adventure Club with a
Okay.
co-founder, another speaker, Chris Howard, and we were running this. It was a travel group where we brought entrepreneurs to developing countries, and we did social entrepreneurial work with our networks and our resources.
Okay.
And so we did that. And during that time, I had an office in the city of Sydney. And just because it was basically myself sort of running this thing across the world. But I decided I'll take a little office, and I shared it with a few other people. And at the time, I was sharing it with a guy named Ruben Buchanan, who had a magazine called Wealth Creator.
Okay.
And he had a guy named Jack DeLosa that worked with him in the office. And I met Jack, and I think Jack had crewed a couple times, maybe for Tony event, maybe for some of the other speakers in that came around through Australia. I can't remember that piece, but I know I kind of saw him around.
Okay.
Around that time, he was leaving the magazine and starting something brand new himself. And he was young, and I think he was at the time in his young 20s. And so he started this thing called the Entourage, which is still going very strong in Australia. And at the very beginning, because I met him in this shared office and we stayed in touch, at the very beginning of the journey of the Entourage, which basically is a huge, massive national training organization for entrepreneurs to scale their businesses, he brought me in as a mentor to help the other business owners.
Okay.
And that was all around the time I was starting in digital marketing. So I came in, and the impact, I think, because I've been with the team and I've been there to just give and give and give without anything in exchange to help their members. What's really interesting about this relationship is I've seen the impact I can make, because I've seen people now in the organization and years later sort of coming up to me saying, you told me this one thing, and because of it, my business has grown so much. Or I see the Entourage using tips that I've given into their own operations and their own growth. But most interestingly, with the theory or the idea of just give and don't expect anything in return, what's happened recently is now I'm a partner with their organization, and they refer me huge amounts of business. And I never asked for that. I never expected it. And it took 10 years to get there. But just an interesting, I guess, kind of full circle story of a relationship of, you never know who you're going to meet, what they'll become, and just the fact of giving and just seeing where that takes you.
Yeah. You really you covered a lot in there, and I don't want to just like gloss over it, because this has been my experience too for
Yeah.
years of just you know finding out how we can be of service to others, being
Yes.
contributing, helping, serving, pouring into others. And if anything, I think as a general rule, we entrepreneurs are really great at giving. We're giving, we're generous. I know I've been that way all my life. That's who I am. And
Yeah.
and also for most of my life, I pretty much sucked when it came to receiving, because I was just like, even when people would be like, okay, what can I do to help you? I'm like, oh no, I'm good. And
The
God
same.
forbid, I would never ask for help, because I didn't want to bother people or inconvenience them or whatever. But yet my friend Jesse, 11 years ago, he pointed something out to me because we were having a conversation about this, and he asked me, he's like, Kev, he's like, when you give to somebody else who just really appreciates it, how does that make you feel? And I said, Jesse, I was like, that is the most amazing feeling. I was like, I don't know anything that feels better to me than that. I love giving to others who just
Yeah.
really appreciate that. And he points out, he's like, so do you realize that by you showing up the way that you do and kind of closing yourself off to receiving, and he's like, you are depriving others from having the experience that you just told me was the most amazing experience ever. He's like, who are you to deprive others from that? And when
Wow.
he mentioned that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never even thought of it that way before. And
Neat.
he's like, Kevin, he's like, giving and receiving are just different sides of the same coin. And he's like, it's like breathing. If I were to ask you, what do you prefer better, breathing in or breathing out? And you gave me an answer, I'd tell you, great. Try only doing that for a while and see how far it gets you. We've got to do both. And
Yeah.
like the same is true of giving and receiving. He's like, and there's nothing wrong with giving. But he's like, I want you to understand that, make this a game, make this an experiment, and start spreading your wings a little bit when it comes to receiving. Start expanding your receiving muscle and being more open to it. When somebody asks you, what can they do to help you? Come up with an answer. Or if you don't come up with an answer, let them know, hey, can I get back to you when I do have a good answer? And when people want to do for you, don't shut them down. Don't say, oh, no, 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 I'm good, I'm good. Let them do that. Let them, because you know what? Here's the thing, Kev. When you open yourself up to receiving more, it's just going to allow you to give more, because that's what they're going to do. That's what
Oh
givers
my gosh.
do, you know. And
Yeah.
so, I love hearing the stories like the one that you just shared. And I will tell you, from personal experience, that for us entrepreneurs who are these giving, generous people who just want to help, when we open ourselves up to receiving as well, it just allows us to give so much more as well. And there is such power in that. And
I'm so glad that you just shared that. I think I actually needed to hear that right now. And also the way you explain that, the distinctions you made in that, I just kind of something clicked for me as well. So I really am grateful for you sharing that.
well, you're welcome. You're welcome. Well, okay. So for anybody listening to this, going, man, Kevin, I really like Heather. I love the way Heather shows up. How can they find out more about you guys? How can they find out more about the work that you're doing? Any resources, any tools you can let them know about, Heather?
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. Yes. It's easy. It's websitelove.com.au. And in the menu, it says free resources. And I have loads of stuff in there. I have like checklists to check what's wrong with your website. I have quizzes. I have masterclasses, my podcast as well. It's all under free resources. I'd recommend starting there because you'll get a lot of great value. And I do have clients in the States and in other countries. I know it says .com.au, but I'm American, so I have American clients too.
Awesome. 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 Well, Heather, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation. And any last thing you feel led to share before we call it a wrap?
Yes. Thank you for asking that question. When we are growing our businesses and we have times of overwhelm and stress, we tend to get reclusive and go inside, a lot of us. And it's those moments that you can spiral into a place where you just go, leave it with me. I'll just do this. Like you go into this weird mindset. I find with people I've spoken to over the years. In those moments, reach out to your network. Remember you're not alone and be vulnerable. And now that you know what Kevin said about reaching, receiving as well as asking and having that cycle be completed, remember that. Just take that in and hold that into your heart in those moments where you have harder times, because we can't do this alone, you guys. We cannot
That's
do
right.
this alone. We cannot make the impact by ourselves. So yeah, that's what I'd like to say.
Awesome. Well, once again, thank you so much, Heather. Really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. And I'm just excited to share this with a lot of other entrepreneurs. So thank you again.
Thank you.